Rumi Morales is kind of a legend in crypto VC. People would ask me years ago, do you know Rumi? And she's looking at me like, I'd be like, I know of Rumi. Rumi started the team at CME Ventures. She was Outlier Ventures, and she's now Digital Currency Group. She's really a champion of the space and a champion of Chicago. And moderating today with her is going to be Hilton Irons. Hilton, I would say, is the up-and-comer. He's Listen Ventures, and he's getting a lot of notoriety, and I'm looking forward to this conversation.
Okay, let's catch up. Okay. All right. Where do we sit? We got
I'm following you.
some chairs to choose from here.
Yeah. This one? You see? Cool. Awesome. Thank you, Brian. And thank you, Rumi. Excited to chat with you today. As y'all have heard, Rumi has been in the space for a while, and so we're all blessed to have her insights for sure. So I'll just start thinking about institutional adoption, and would love to hear how you've kind of seen that evolve high level over your time in the space.
Sure, I appreciate the question, Hilton. Thank you all for sticking around and staying here till the end. We were joking in the back that for those who are in the very last session, you're the true committed ones, right?
Yeah, that's right.
Thank you so much for the power.
Yes.
I realize it looks like I'm ready to go to a garden party, though, not so much a crypto conference, although I see another flower dress in the back over there, so flower power. Yeah, so as mentioned, I've been in this space for forever, it feels like. I had my son, and I got into Bitcoin the same year, 2013, and my son just turned 9 years old. And so for me, that's always good perspective. Because I'm like, I look at him like, how are you not 900 years old? Because it feels like you should be. But Bitcoin is just about to enter the 4th grade for me right now. It's still very early in its development. So when it comes to institutional adoption, part of me wants to say, well, what should we expect? What do we expect? It's just entering the 4th grade. Are you going to see every single institution say, yes, I want to go into this still nascent, still controversial technology, especially for institutions that may have shareholders and there's still existing misconceptions with crypto around. So on one hand, I'm like, this is very early on in our journey. But on the other hand, let me tell you, when I first got into this in 2013, I had assumed that by 2016, most major banks would be using blockchain. And then 2017, like, oh, surely it's going to happen now. Guess what? Here we are, 2022, and I'm still quite wrong about it. And so I asked myself, why? Why was I expecting there to be so much greater adoption at this point by institutions? Was it just naivete? I mean, what is it exactly? And I think that's something that we should all ask of ourselves. On my own personal journey, kind of coming through this, I realized a few things. For some people who say, well, blockchain is great, it removes friction. A lot of people make money from friction. They don't want that to go away. Many people say, well, it's so easy for me just to live my life as it is right now. Disruption can take a long time. I used to work at the CME Group. There's still people trading on with open outcry, right? The SIBO just launched another in-person trading pit. This shouldn't be expected to be either or black and white. We can combine here for a while. So there are some institutions that are adopting this, but it's going to take a long time still.
Got it. That's helpful. And I feel like the kind of natural question is usually the why. But I think it's interesting that you expected by 2016 so many people would have adopted this, and sort of understanding what technologies or what things were most promising to you in those 2013, 2014, and how have you seen those sort of evolve and shift, and where do you think some of the maybe hesitation is coming from? Yeah.
That's a great question. There's some of the old guard companies from that stage and era that are still around, like Coinbase, Kraken. It's like, wow, they're still plugging at it. But Brett was on stage here earlier from FTX. That was just established in 2019. We have seen waves of this happen. But remembering just that first growth of seeing Coinbase for the first time, I remember passing, I think, on its Series B because its valuation was like 300 million. I'm like, that's way too high. Are you kidding me? But just assuming that was the trajectory and that was the way we're going to go. Some of those companies now are just not they're not around anymore. They haven't either been able to innovate, and especially in some industries where we've now discovered that blockchain and crypto may not make sense, specifically around healthcare for those people. There's like this whole blockchain and healthcare thing that happened. No, there's some other around supply chain that has also proven to be much, much harder than some of those initial believers expected. So what did survive was financial services, and we're still seeing that develop, right?
Yeah.
But there's some industries where the institutional adoption did not happen. But what gets me excited, and for me it's been a surprise, and I think what we're seeing right now with Web3 in particular, is a new wave of institutions that have never gone into crypto before, but more than anybody else, is really embracing it. And that's around brands, right? Gaming, entertainment, media, music, everyone that's embracing NFTs in the metaverse right now, from Disney to Gucci, has plowed into this so much faster than any Goldman Sachs or JP Morgan ever did. So that's something, and we can dig into that a little bit more, about this new group of institutions that you wouldn't think of as financial companies, but are embracing this technology because they see it as more than a financial technology.
Yeah, I love that you went there, because I think there's kind of a two-sided coin between, when you think about institutions, maybe we're thinking about sort of the underpinnings, the blockchain, the back end, and not necessarily the consumer facing or the brand of it or the relationship. And so how do you think that sort of impacts adoption, what consumers want, or maybe understanding the technology or understanding how it can impact their lives?
Right, I think the consumer experience is critical, and Web3 has done a really lousy job of that up until kind of recently. Web3 developers are great developers, but they've not brought along with them the Web2 focus on customer retention, customer attraction, user experience, and emotional connection to what you're using. So I am very hopeful now with these entrants. Again, I mentioned Disney, Gucci, Nike, companies that know how to market and to sell and to get people excited about using this. So we just need to now find easier on-ramps that connect to people's hearts and try to go forward from there.
Yeah, got it. Do you think that as we think about challenges and we think about how adoption sometimes takes longer than you feel like, how do you think about being flexible sort of in that industry? I feel like that's the name of the game, right? That flexibility from a kind of investor standpoint, but also as you're working with builders, understanding that challenges arise and having to kind of switch, whether that's a product conversation. How do you just think about that as we think about the industry moving forward, that flexibility?
Yeah, this notion of flexibility is so variable depending on who you are and where you're coming from. I think no doubt an entrepreneur and a startup founder has to be the most flexible of all. You think about where Bitcoin was and its price earlier this year and where it is today. That's been a lot for any startup in this space to have to manage, right? The second, I guess, most flexible then would have to be an investor. I mean, you want to hold the startup person's feet to the fire, but also recognize that your return profile may change, and then all of a sudden your company has gone from just raising to struggling, and trying to help them through that difficulty. Where I found the hardest, though, when it comes to institutional adoption of blockchain has been around the inflexibility of many traditional institutions who just choose to say, oh, good, Bitcoin's crashed, I don't have to worry about this now, right? For 6 months, okay, it was hot for a while, and now I can just go back to my life. That is such a frozen mindset, right? Even just because something has crashed doesn't mean that you shouldn't care. It doesn't mean that the technology has lost any of its value because the markets value it any less. But having myself, been 7 years at the CME Group, 7 years at Goldman Sachs, I'll admit to a lot of traditional institutional DNA in my veins and know just how hard it is to be flexible when you've got a huge corporate bureaucracy saying, this is great, this is one less problem we have to think about right now. But that's a problem. Thinking about blockchain and crypto as a problem before you think of it as an opportunity.
Well, there you go. Well, thinking about the other side of the coin, if you think about institutions that have sort of made that plunge, what things do you think they've done differently, or how have they looked at it differently to kind of make that plunge?
Yeah, well, I think for some of those, it's funny, right? there's different ways that institutions have done this. Obviously, there's the Elon Musk model, the Michael Saylor model, which is like, I'm buying Bitcoin. Oh, it's all been sold. Ooh, Dogecoin. It's like, oh, okay.
Yeah.
You've got the JP Morgan model, which, Jamie Dimon is just saying, there's no way in hell I'm doing Bitcoin, and yet he's got a massive team doing it underneath him, right? So there's definitely different approaches to how the institutions who have plunged in have done so. I would say for the most part, they're the ones that I admire, are the ones that haven't been that extreme or the other, but have just consistently always been investing, studying, testing things out, and not thinking that this is going to be a short-term fix or a magic pill that's going to make all their problems go, or if they're magic, it's like a weight loss supplement or something. Oh, I didn't lose my 20 pounds. I'm not going to use this pill anymore. It's like, look, there's other stuff that needs to happen here. Be patient. And the good news is I think there are a lot of good companies that have quietly, methodically been working in blockchain for many years now.
Yeah, no, I think that makes sense in terms of thinking about the two big kind of differences or different ways that people plunge in. How important do you think sort of broader sentiment is to, not necessarily the growth of the market, but maybe the growth of adoption, whether that's consumer sentiment, whether that's markets, prices, et cetera. How much of an impact do you think that has?
I think sentiment is very important, but I've been through so many ups and downs now and crashes along the way. I think much more important is if you've got the core conviction, for all of you stalwarts that are still sitting here in this room, you have a commitment to this, and that is what needs to be constant more than just going up and down with changes in market sentiment. That being said, it helps a lot when you realize that more people are paying attention to this novel technology, because for believers like us at Digital Currency Group and others in this room, this is the future, and we want more people to be aware of that. You want more people to be educated about it, and people tend to be aware and educated on things when there's a lot of positive sentiment. So obviously that's what we will continue to try to see out there in the marketplace. But that positive sentiment is really grounded by proper education, and we still all need to work on that, especially on Capitol Hill and other places.
Of course. I mean, well, that was going to kind of be my next point was, sometimes I feel like when you're not working directly on the institutional level, it's hard to know how much education is required still. I'm like, since 2013, is it an education issue still? Or kind of where do you think the biggest challenges for some of these older, kind of slower to move institutions? Do they understand the value prop completely and it's just like, we'll wait until we absolutely have to? Or how do you think about going about that education?
I say this with all the love in my heart, but an older, slower to move institution is my dad. I've been talking to him about crypto now for years. At first he's like, I don't know what you're talking about. But little by little, he starts to send me articles. Oh, here's Bitcoin.
Yeah.
And then the other day, what happened? Oh, I was in this Reuters article and I forwarded it to him. And he's like, I wish that more people would talk about Bitcoin not just as a currency and not focus on the markets. I'm like, oh my goodness, what's happening here? But I think when we talk about education, I think what we always have to think about, we don't want to preach at people saying you must believe what I believe. It's rather understanding you from where you're coming from and showing how crypto and how blockchain is relevant to you, what you care about. This is not just a financial technology, as we mentioned, right? This is a technology with a number of applications around privacy, identity, security, which is going to be very, very critical, well beyond anyone's bank account. So for my dad, what has mattered to him is the fact that he's on Facebook all the time. And I was telling him, it's like, well, think about how much you publish on Facebook. Shouldn't you own that? You wrote it. Think of all the likes that you get. Shouldn't you be the recipient of all those accolades? Like, why does Mark Zuckerberg get to benefit from that, right? This is what crypto can also enable, right? These decentralized, peer-to-peer, mutually beneficial networks are such that it's not just a central tech monopoly that gets to own you and your rights to your data, your identity. And my dad's like, yeah, I get this now. So that's how he became a believer. Find what matters to them and work towards their understanding rather than just preaching them and saying, well, this is what I want you to understand.
For sure. I need to try that on my dad. That was great. So, I think part of this title is where do we go from here?
Yeah.
And so I would love to kind of just hear how you think about the future, however you want to answer that question, because I feel like you're going to give us something great. But the future, whether that's institutional adoption and sort of, as you thought about 2016 and 2013, how do you think about, 2030?
Right. No, it's a great question. Having been through so many cycles of this now, I've seen that every single time, though, crypto keeps on getting more impactful. More people with every cycle get involved. When it was the crypto winter of 2018, I remember around Christmas time, it was so depressing, and it wasn't just because Bitcoin was low. It's like no one understood what I was going through. Like nobody around me understood that crypto had just collapsed. Like they couldn't care, they didn't know. The pains are just like a few core people who are like, oh, I'm so sad. It's like, yeah, let's be sad together. But you don't get to share this with your family or your friends. Now with the decline of crypto, it's just been so much more broad-based how people are aware of this. So I think with each cycle up, it is just going to be getting bigger and bigger and bigger and more influential over time. So I do anticipate seeing a lot further institutional adoption, again, by those institutions that have always been working. But now they're really now seeing for themselves what is the best thing, what truly works for me here. We're also seeing a lot more sophistication in the startups. In the ICO boom back in, say, 2017, oh my gosh, these people were just launching tokens like mad. Yep. No lockup periods. It was kind of a disaster. If you look at the way token events have been recently, and the way that they're structured, it's much more committed to the long-term success of the network. These are not get-rich-quick schemes anymore. So take more sophisticated institutions with more sophisticated startups. My anticipation is that we're going to see a lot better growth at this next wave up. And then again, as mentioned, this whole different wave of industries, consumer-focused, brand-focused industries coming into crypto. It's not just a financial services thing anymore. This is about brands, it's about culture, entertainment, gaming. Those are the industries I'm so excited about. You can call it the metaverse, NFTs, Web3, what have you. I call it an emotional attachment to this technology is what I expect to see going forward.
Yeah, and I mean, you mentioned culture. There was a conversation about DAOs earlier, thinking about how people are really starting to engage on the consumer level. Is great as we think about mass adoption and sentiment. Yeah, I mean, I would love to open it up to the audience for a bit of Q&A if anyone has any burning questions for Rumi.
See, gentleman back there, sorry. Oh, there's a microphone.
F-Maxi incoming question, so apologies in advance. How have you reconciled Bitcoin's changing narrative between, at first it was very much a, global currency, everyone's going to use it, it's going to be great, to we're a store of value, it's like digital gold. And secondly, how have you counterposed that against watching the number of developers pouring into the Ethereum network versus Bitcoin?
I would say that the narratives were never created by the technology itself, right? But people choosing to build their own companies or use cases off of the technology. So Bitcoin, for the original paper, was as a peer-to-peer, right, payment system, but quickly people started to do other things with it, from speculation to investment or what have you. I think people like to create these analogies for themselves. So you can call it digital gold, or you can say that it's a store of value, which was Ripple's phrase actually for XRP. I don't know. For me, after all these years, the way I've always explained it to myself is that it's a programmable message, right? And within that, you can store anything you want to that's of value to you. So my only reason for survival, I think, in this industry is because I've had my own definitions of what this stuff is, as opposed to believing what other people say, oh, it's this, it's that, the other, because you're probably going to be disappointed if it doesn't work out exactly as you've planned it to be. So this is all my long way of saying that Bitcoin has been a foundation for many things. Ethereum, likewise, has been very early on around, obviously, smart contracts and their development. And then we have everything else for the multiple use cases that they're doing. Maybe this is me just being a digital currency group. I love them all, right? I really do. And I don't value one necessarily over the other. I don't think any one use case is more important than the other. But I think that's because I'm just passionately involved in just promoting this entire industry, not getting involved in the tribal warfare, not trying to compare one to another as superior for this, that, or the other. I'm just, I guess, more high-level supporter of the entire ecosystem. If I know that's a bad answer, but I tried. Sorry. Yeah, there's a question there. Sorry.
So we talk about the education outside of the industry, but I think even within the industry, with some of the irresponsible things we've seen at some larger firms and CFI and funds doing prop trading, et cetera, how does DCG, and I'll use Genesis as a good example, even with a $2 billion shortfall, Mike closes, right, something like 1.2 of that, right, for a margin call to catch up. But I think the risk mitigation was actually pretty responsibly done at DCG in a good way. So how does DCG look at like educating our own tribe within this world, so we're not, people came in expecting 20% returns. That's the sexy part to get people in the door in a lot of ways, but it's non-sustainable. So, DCG is actually, I think, a good example of solid risk mitigation based on everything I've read.
Well, I appreciate that. Thank you. I think, again, I'm going to take the super high level and give you a bad answer, but it's how I frame my continued existence in this space. Otherwise, I would have quit a long time ago. We have to be always mindful of human nature, always, right? And this is actually something that I personally have struggled with crypto and blockchain for years, is the fact that, yes, it's a technology with so much value for society, but you can make money off it really quickly. And it's human nature includes greed, a lot of it. And so I think not just education, but just us having each, right, the personal will and patience to not get absorbed too much into the rampant money-making side of it, which is very hard when so many people in crypto are like out buying their Lamborghinis and stuff. Maybe I've just seen too many crashes and whatnot that I'm like, I'm in this for the tech, I'm in this for the impact, I'm not in this to make a lot of money. That makes me rare in crypto, by the way. But I think that's a sentiment that also needs to be shared if we're going to be trying to really thrive here. What? That's why I'm wearing a dress from Target, actually. That's just the way I am. But yeah, it's we all have to do our best to not get sucked into that. It's something that bothers me actually about play to earn, play to learn. It's like, especially I'm saying play to earn, because it's like the focus, you're just playing like to make money, just to earn. We have to think about what that does to ourselves as human beings, and just be watchful, mindful of that, because it can lead us down a not so good slope.
Great answer. Looking at the clock, I think we might have time for one more. Are there any other questions out there? Nope.
And if not, I'm going to throw a big thank you to Paul. I know he's going to come up on stage at the end of this, but my goodness, right? I say this as someone who's been in Chicago in crypto since 2013, right? When it was just me and a few crickets, like nothing was happening here in terms of people who were talking about this. And although many people now have come up in Chicago and in crypto, building and developing, no one's done what Paul has been able to do in just like a year, Paul. Gather the community together like this, assemble such a wonderful group of sponsors and speakers, all for the sake of Web3 and for Chicago. So thank you, Paul.
Thank you, Paul.
And thank you all.
Thank you all for being here, and thank you so much, Rumi.
Thanks.